Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I'd like to call to order the Everett Council meeting of April 3rd, 2024. For the record, Councilmember Bader will be participating this evening meeting remotely. The City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Public Meetings Act. Committee members are welcome to join either in person, remote via Zoom, or by calling in. For those who wish to participate in the future via Zoom, you'll find the instructions to register for public comment on the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Please note that we do not allow comments of any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. We ask that the audience refrain from clapping, cheering, or booing, and no signs of any kind are allowed in the chambers. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Franklin. Here. Councilmember Fosse. Here. Councilmember Vogely.
Excused.
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Here.
Councilmember Bader.
Here.
Councilmember Ryan. Here. Councilmember Toohey.
Here.
President Schwab.
Here. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilmember Toohey to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilmember Ryan to read the land acknowledgement.
The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Stahopes people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, and gathered on these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with these lands and waters. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their voices, their people, and their stories to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the minutes for March 27th, 2024?
Councilmember Ryan so moves.
Seconded.
There's been a motion and a second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Fosse.
Yes.
Vice President Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Councilmember Toohey.
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, President Schwab and council and community. I just have one thing today. I wanted to make sure our council and our community are aware of the Tax Fraud Days of Action next week. The council and I all stand with our tradespeople, labor partners, and community against tax fraud in the construction industry, which not only hurts our workers, but also impacts our community greatly. So when contractors misclassify workers, the workers miss out on benefits and protections, and our community then misses out on tax revenue that helps us provide all the public services we need. So I want to thank Fidencio for bringing this to my attention, and we were able to film a short video about this that we'll be sharing on social media next week. And just want to, again, thank all our construction and tradespeople who work incredibly hard to build our community and our city. And that's all I have today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Hi, Angie. Do we have anyone signed up to speak today?
Good evening, President Schwab. We do. We have a few people in chambers, so we'll start with Lane. If you could please come to the podium. And please state your full name and city of residence, and just press the right button there on the base, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Yep, on there. The right button.
Oh, the right button.
Yes.
All right.
And you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The
Okay.
monitoring system's there.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. My name's Adam Forehand, resident of Everett. Been a resident of Snohomish County my whole life. Is there any way we can kind of figure out how to make or get nicer security people, whatever, are walking around at night in the yellow vests? The other night I was having a bad night. Broke my phone. And I was really upset, and I was basically throwing a temper tantrum because I was so mad at myself. But one of the, I ain't ever seen him before, but he was on the job basically, and he threatened the heck out of me. Of course, I threatened him back. And then he took out some brass knuckles and said, come on. And well, of course, my anger flew, so. But other than that, yeah, they're kind of a little on the rude side. Most of the other people say that, you know, we've been harassed a little bit by some of them. I know there's a couple of good guys on there that do walk the street, but for the most part, there's been some bad guys in there, just, treating us unfairly. And as well, yeah, the usual, we need a bathroom. And the usual, we need a place. And is there any way we can get rid of this stupid no sit, no lie, for at night, so we can actually get some sleep? That would be nice. Other than that, that's all I pretty much got for now. Thank you, guys.
I'm going to ask somebody from our police department just to follow up if there was a threatening behavior, we want to be aware of it, and so we can follow up with the security company. Thank you.
Next, if Lewis could please come to the podium. And please state your full name and city of residence, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Luis Aroche, Everett. Good evening, honorable members of the City of Everett. My name is Luis Aroche, proud resident of the City of Everett and member of 425 Carpenters out of Burlington, Washington. I'm here today to speak to you about critical issues of wage theft in our city. Wage theft is a pervasive problem that affects countless workers in our community, robbing them of their hard-earned wages and undermining their economic security. Wage theft takes many forms, including but not limited to unpaid overtime, minimum wage violations, off-the-clock work, misclassification of employees as independent contractors, illegal deductions from paychecks, and outright non-payment of wages. These illegal practices not only harm individual workers and their families, but also create an uneven playing field for businesses that follow the law. Workers who experience wage theft often face significant financial hardships, struggling to make ends meet, pay their bills, and support their families. This not only impacts their immediate well-being, but also has long-term consequences for their financial stability and future prospects. As a community, we must take a stand against wage theft and ensure that all workers are treated fairly and receive the wages they have rightfully earned. This requires strong enforcement of existing labor laws, increased penalties for violators, better education and outreach to workers about their rights, and improved mechanisms for reporting and addressing wage theft complaints. I urge the City Council to take decisive actions to combat wage theft in our city by 1, strengthening enforcement mechanisms to hold employers accountable for wage theft violations. 2, increasing penalties for employers found guilty of wage theft to deter future violations. 3, providing support and resources for workers to help them understand their rights and report wage theft incidents. 4, collaborating with community organizations, labor unions, and other stakeholders to raise awareness about wage theft and promote fair labor practices. By taking these steps, we can send a clear message that wage theft will not be tolerated in the City of Everett, and that we are committed to upholding the rights and dignity of all workers. Thank you for your attention to this important issue. I urge you to prioritize the fight against wage theft and take meaningful action to protect the rights of our workers in the City of Everett. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, if Rebecca could please come to the podium. And please state your full name and city of residence, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
I'm Rebecca Freevert. I'm in Everett for 35 years. And this Saturday begins the 2024 Annual National Library Week. And April 9th is National Library Workers Day, and so the Board of Trustees would like to acknowledge that. During this National Library Week, the Board of Trustees of the Everett Public Library System sends its deepest thanks and gratitude to the director and the staff of the Everett Public Library. We acknowledge that safe, welcoming public spaces are needed now more than ever, while also increasingly subject to potential political and budgetary threats. Despite this, our library staff continue to make EPLS a thriving community hub for gathering, seeking information and services, and providing education, entertainment, and enrichment. Our library staff are trusted public servants, friends, and neighbors. They offer a doorway to new worlds and a safe harbor when the going gets rough, a springboard, and a safe landing place. Our staff are a professional, educated workforce seeking out continuing education opportunities and always striving to provide outstanding service to our members. They are experts in connecting our community to information and services, and they invest deeply in their work. This year's National Library Week theme is Ready, Set, Library. We encourage all our neighbors to engage with your local library this next week, whether you've been a library patron for years or are a first-time visitor. Library cards are free, and the library has many events and activities for adults and youth alike. Information on both can be found at our website, epls.org. And while you're there, make sure to thank your local library workers for their service to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that concludes our public comments.
Thank you. Moving on to council comments and liaison reports. Councilmember Mary Fossey. I'm sorry, whoa. My fault, I didn't, Mayor, you're first. Sorry. Oh, you gave yours?
I'm good.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. You looked at me like you had something to say there. All right. Councilmember Fossey, thank you.
Thanks. Forgive my voice. I've been a little bit under the weather lately. It didn't stop me from being dragged out of the house for Easter and go to an Easter egg hunt with the kiddos in Drew Nielsen Park. That was a fun event. I hear that they are now looking for a new volunteer to lead the event in the future, so if anyone is interested, that role is open. I've had a lot of recent meetings with constituents sharing a lot of their concerns about a variety of issues. With folks reaching out, it's always an awesome idea to copy our wonderful executive assistant, Angela Eli, on those emails, and she can help get those meetings set up. I was able to attend the NAACP gala recently and got to see some of our own residents win some very prestigious awards, and it just reminded me of such pride I have in the community here and all the different advocates and people fighting just to make our community a better place. A shout out to my librarians for our National Library Week. And I believe my fellow Councilmember Ryan will likely speak to the Health and Human Services meeting that we just had, as well as the wage theft. So I will leave it to her.
Thank you, and sorry about the beat. Councilmember Zarlingo.
Just two things tonight. One of them, thanks to a variety of people working. A lot of the local transit and some local projects are funded through federal dollars coming from the Puget Sound Regional Council, and I'm on their Transportation Policy Board. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Mayor Franklin, Director Jennifer Gregerson, Melinda Adams of Everett Transit to try to get our fair share of that to keep transit going, especially transit critical in this community, helping a lot of our equity-focused communities get around. That's particularly important, and so thanks for their efforts on all of that. One other thing, last week I didn't get the chance to talk about the activities of the Snohomish County Tomorrow organization. So this is a countywide organization. And the briefing last week had a lot of different aspects to it, but I just wanted to highlight one of those, one family of things, and that was workforce development. There's a lot of really important things going on with worksource entities. Some interesting ones in particular were incumbent worker training programs. Some of these match up to 90% of businesses' training costs. They help us avoid layoffs, enhance our human capital or human resources. And also some ARPA funding has been going to programs including healthcare, data analytics. And also there's an effort to create a kind of a Seattle North County brand. So a kind of an entity where people, to help with respect to tourism and visitors to the area. So again, a positive thing for the city. And then In an interesting coincidence, discussion that Port Director Lisa DeFeber had, our Port CEO Lisa DeFeber did in terms of their effort for a ballot measure here, she mentioned some activities that are going on at a Maritime Training Institute at the Port of Everett. So there are apprenticeship requirements going on, some construction going on with apprenticeship requirements, and also training for people in the maritime areas, Coast Guard, Navy, commercial shipping, and ferries. Heaven knows we need more ferry staff and resources. A lot of us rely on that. And also coming 315 housing units and some ground floor retail. So again, kind of addressing some of the critical needs. And then lastly, enhancing Everett's connection to the huge Marysville and Arlington Cascade Industrial Center. So we are the seaport, and we're where I-5 comes through. So having all of these things work together in Snohomish County is an effort that's certainly worth the time that we put into it. And I did want to remark in particular about workforce development and keeping the workers we have, enhancing their skills, retraining, back training. They've got a number of different terms, but we need all of that we can get, and I really appreciate it. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there he is. Councilmember Bader, we see you on video now.
Thanks. Was playing around with video there. My apologies for not being there with you. I'm battling a cold too and didn't want to give it to the rest of you. Maybe if you could put me and Councilmember Fossey next to each other, quarantine us, I would have come over, but my apologies for not being there. No report and no comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ryan.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Let's see where to start. So last Thursday, I attended the Mayor's Drug Task Force as liaison, and it was a really great discussion last week, as they all have been. The discussion centered around getting a good understanding of the legal landscape and the law enforcement approaches to the opioid crisis in our community and folks who are misusing drugs. And so we did a fishbowl experiment where the panelists were all sitting in a round table in the middle, all speaking with each other, and it led to a really organic discussion. We all learned a lot, and also all cried a little bit too, with just the notion of how finding hope in a hopeless situation. And so I appreciate everybody's words and all of the approach that they have to the situation. One of the things that struck me during the conversation, Chief DeMarco shared about the response that EFD has to overdose call, and just the amount of resources of the cities goes to a call when they receive a call on 911. And on Friday, I did a police ride-along, and the first call that we went on was an overdose in the Casino Road area. So seeing that firsthand about 24 hours later, so the person had overdosed. There were 2 police officers on site, and then 8 firefighters showed up. And so total, there were 10 people, 11 including myself as an observer. 2 squad cars. I'm trying to remember if there was 1 or 2 ladder trucks that showed up, and 2 ambulances. So it was a pretty massive response for the person who was experiencing an overdose. They luckily, unfortunately, were saved and were able to continue on with their evening. But just like it was a good example of how often that happens. And I know the numbers are pretty high too. Of I believe it's last year there was 100 overdose deaths in the city of Everett, and I'm trying to remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's a pretty massive drain on our system to respond to overdose calls. And so I've been keeping that in mind, a lot of ways that we can help the situation. So more to come on that. Earlier this evening, we had our Health and Human Services Committee meeting, and we had a great update about the $4 million grant that had been offered to the city from the county to work on a congregate shelter option. There's the shelter that's at UCC Church right now over on Rockefeller and Everett, and that church and facility has been housing 40 people for the last 4 or so years. But the building has been sold to Housing Hope. I believe it's to provide senior housing, but in the process, that congregate shelter does need to move. So the Everett Gospel Mission is partnering with the city, and the $4 million is going to be used to purchase the property that's next door to the current site down on Smith Avenue to expand their services. So there's, the site currently has the pallet shelters, the beds at the congregate shelter themselves, and then they're going to be expanding to have those 40 beds at the new facility, but then also providing different types of beds. So there's low barrier beds, there's going to be high barrier beds, women, men, and a mix of situations to provide services for more people. I know when I talk to community members about congregate sheltering, there's always a concern about site management and site control, and Everett Gospel Mission's been putting a lot of thought and care into it. And so the plan is to put a fence around the entire facility with a single point of entry, and at that single point of entry is a fairly enhanced security passageway similar to an airport. So it'd be a metal detector and a bag scanner to make sure that the residents on site feel safe, that they know that what's coming into that facility and that the staff can also feel safe as well. So it's all in the very early stages. I believe Everett Gospel Mission just closed on the property last week, if I remember correctly. So it's all very new, but glad to see this coming around and know it's going to help a large number of people. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing about Library Week. I had the opportunity to serve as the liaison for the library board and was just absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of work that the library does and all of the services, and not just books, but all of the events, and it's just the great way that Everett Library takes care of our community. So thank you for coming to share about that. And thank you, Lewis, for sharing about wage theft. I appreciate that. As folks might remember, in January, I was honored to introduce an ordinance that would prohibit any contractor who has willfully engaged in wage theft from being able to enter into a contract with the city of Everett. I'm pleased to announce that that is still in progress. I've been working with legal to go through the draft and come up with a final draft that could possibly move to committee or come back to council for our first, second, and third reading. So thank you for joining this evening and reminding us of that really important cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, just want to thank the Carpenter members for coming tonight and reminding us of how important it is for us to combat wage theft, and we appreciate your efforts, as well as Councilmember Ryan's efforts for the city. And I want to thank our Abby and our librarians who do a fantastic job, so kudos to them. And just a quick reminder that next Thursday night is the Went Awards, which is the annual Went and Mayor's Art Awards. Will be Thursday night at the Everett Performing Arts Center. Social hour at 6 and the presentation at 7. It's always a lot of fun to hear the story about the artists that are there and get these awards. So it's free admission, so hope to see you there. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. And then for my report, just a reminder, administration's working on an ARPA update for the council allocations, and that will be presented next week. So if you have any changes, editing, or ideas, please work with mayor's staff sooner so you guys can have an up-to-date presentation. Also, I just want to give a report about our council retreat initiatives. I'll go ahead and send something out, more kind of an update. There were 3 basic initiatives, just generally. I mean, there's, you could break them down to different points, but it's community outreach, residents communication, revenue options, which of course that's pretty much we're attacking that one first as the highest priority, and then a process of how council ideas make their way to an ordinance or resolution, and we've started that flow chart, and I think there's some more work to be on that. So just want to give a quick update on that, and more coming for that. And then also, I just want to address wage theft. I support a no tolerance, just like any contracts. There are always creative ways to get around them, and so if there's a contractor that demonstrates the illegal process, there should be zero tolerance. So anyway, so thank you for that reminder. Okay, moving on, we have administrative update.
I don't have an update tonight.
Okay, did I cover them for you? All right, thank you. How about our Deputy City Attorney, Ramsey Rammerman?
I don't have any update, but I am asking for an executive session under RCW 4230 110 sub I to discuss legal issues related to the possible levy lid lift ballot measure. Asking for 15 minutes with no report after.
Okay, thank you. And then, so do I hear a motion to, I guess it's just our one consent item,
Councilmember Ryan moves the one consent agenda item.
Seconded.
Okay, motion is second. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Fosse,
Yes.
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Councilmember Tui.
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes. Okay, item number 2, proposed action item, Council Bill 2403, second reading. Do we have any questions at this time? Okay, I guess moving on to our briefing items. These items come before the city council serving as council committees or of a whole or likely to schedule a future meeting. We have a briefing on Council Bill, item number 3, Council Bill 240390. First reading, adopt the amendment of ordinance 3650-17, a quick service barista stand ordinance under EMC 5.132.020, semicolon .040. Third and final reading will be 4/17/24. Our Deputy City Attorney Ramsey Rammerman will be providing a briefing for this update. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. So this is an amendment that was part of the settlement agreement that we reached in the barista lawsuit last year. As you know, the original purpose of this legislation was primarily to address the exploitive conduct of the barista stand owners who were able to encourage illegal conduct at the stands while facing very little personal risk. In the lawsuit in 2020, the trial court upheld the city's lewd conduct ordinance, but found that the minimum dress requirement in the quick service ordinance violated equal protection of the baristas. As part of the settlement of that lawsuit, we agreed to amend the law to substitute the minimum dress requirement with our lewd conduct dress requirement. So as a result of this amendment, the baristas will be able to dress just as they can anywhere else in the city, meeting the lewd conduct standard, which is basically a minimal bikini, and it doesn't have any other effect on the baristas themselves. What the law will do is put the onus on the stand owners to ensure that their employees are complying with the lewd conduct standard while they are at work, and they will face potential fines and probationary license requirement, and ultimately could lose their license after 3 violations. So again, this is with this amendment, the only real effect on this is on the stand owners, requiring them to enforce the lewd conduct standard for their employees, and no additional burden is put on the baristas.
Okay, Council, do we have any questions at this time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next on our next briefing agenda, item number 4, our legislative session debrief. And Jennifer, would you like to introduce our lobbyist?
Yes, so we have Trevor Justin here to give you a little debrief on this past legislative session, and I'll jump in as well and happy to take your questions.
Can you hear me? Is that all right? Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Council. Good to be back in front of you. I think I was in front of you on January 3rd or 4th for a pre-session presentation, and obviously here for a post-session presentation. I'll kind of do a highlight of kind of some of the session overview topics and then jump into our legislative agenda, which you all saw pre-session, and then report on some of our strong wins from the last legislative session. This year was a short session, 60 days. This is the second year of the biennium. The short session really is designed to kind of tweak the budgets that were passed in the 2023 bigger kind of bite at the apple, the 105-day session, and then work on policies that were not passed in the long session. So really kind of got to appropriate our expectations in a short session, not as big a bite of the apple as the long session is. But again, we started on January 8th and then concluded their business on March 7th, 2024 on time. I want to cover some of the top priorities of the legislature this year. As you all are aware, just like the 105-day long session in 2023, Democrats kind of continue to control the agenda in Olympia with strong majorities in both the House and the Senate, as well as control of the governor's office. There was over 1,200 bills introduced this legislative session, with a number of those passing. Also, bills from the 2023 session are automatically reintroduced into the 2024 session. So pretty much everything was on the table, dating back to anything that didn't pass last year, reintroduced this year. And then, like I said, about 1,200 new bills for 2024 session. Some of the big themes of this legislative session, housing continued to be another big issue. There was bills on rent regulation, bills on transit-oriented development, and then bills on increasing the REIT tax for affordable housing. There was climate proposals on the table this year. A big one was House Bill 1589, what would phase out natural gas for Puget Sound Energy, and then Senate Bill 6058, which would link our Climate Commitment Act with Quebec and California. And then there was a number of workforce and labor proposals that are in my report that I think Jennifer sent you before this meeting. There was also policy on artificial intelligence, ended up being a task force that passed. So those are kind of some of the larger themes of the 2024 session. There was also 6 initiatives to the legislature brought forward by a conservative interest group called Let's Go Washington, also sponsored by State Republican Party Chair Jim Walsh. In the end, the legislature did pass 3 of those initiatives to the legislature: I-2113 on police pursuits, I-2111 on prohibiting a state income tax, and I-2081 on parental notification. The legislature did pass those 3 initiatives. They ignored the other 3 initiatives, Initiative 2117 on gas tax for the Climate Commitment Act. If passed, that one would repeal the Climate Commitment Act. A little bit more on that in a second. I-2109 repealing the capital gains tax, and I-2124 on the state long-term care program. So what the legislature did is they essentially passed the initiatives that dealt more with policy and ignored the ones that had more significant fiscal implications for the state. Again, the legislature ignored those, so it'll go on the November ballot for voters to decide. The legislature also passed biennial budgets. Again, these are more tweaks to the previous budgets that were passed in the 23 session. The state operating budget, just for some context, $71.9 billion passed. That was an increase of $2.1 billion from the 2023 supplemental operating budget, or excuse me, the full operating budget that was passed in the 23 session. You get a good picture of the capital budget. The supplemental budget appropriated $1.3 billion in total funds, compared to the 2023 capital budget was $9 billion, so obviously significantly less, much smaller bite at the apple on the capital budget. And then on the supplemental transportation budget, the legislature appropriated $14.6 billion. All 3 of those budgets do include Climate Commitment Act funds, so a caveat on some of those funds: if that initiative were to pass, those funds will likely not be spent because it would repeal the program. Anything I missed there, Jennifer?
In the transportation budget, we were able to advance the design and construction funding for the North Broadway pedestrian bridge. It was in like a future, so no man's land future bucket, and now is in construction money is in 27-29, but that is tied to the Climate Commitment Act dollars. So, but it was very exciting that we were able to move that. On a lot of projects get to bump up in the transportation budget, so that was a nice win.
Yeah, I'll jump into our legislative agenda items. You all saw that pre-session. We had a couple kind of bigger bucket items: quality of life, economic development, and housing bucket, workforce development bucket, and then behavior health and public safety. We weren't proposing any legislation ourselves, so we were kind of more reactive and responsive to other proposals that we saw introduced in the legislature. In the report, you'll see the chart at the end of the report reflects our positions taken on those policy proposals. But Jennifer just mentioned, well, let me rewind real quick. The main priorities we had when I stood here in January was a language tweak on the capital budget for the stadium funds, the $7.4 million secured in the 2023 budget. That money was actually allocated to the school district. We wanted to allocate that money to the city of Everett. Happy to report that the supplemental capital budget did reflect that change, so we are reflected in receiving those funds, which was great. The property tax cap bill was another one of our priorities that did not make it across the finish line this legislative session. A little bit tougher to do some more significant either policies or political hot topics in a short session for various reasons, just the condensed timeline and other political dynamics. So that bill did not make it across the finish line. I do want to thank Council Members Arlingo for testifying in support of that bill in front of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and Dan Templeman also testified in support. So we did go on the record supporting that legislation. It got out of one budget committee and then didn't advance further. So no doubt that'll be back in future years. I think one of the most significant wins this session was $500,000 secured in the state operating budget for our street medicine mobile opioid treatment program. I don't know, Jennifer, if you want to do a little bit of context on that.
Yeah, well, just before session started, Governor Gregoire, in her role with Challenge Seattle, actually came up to Everett and visited Providence, and Mayor Franklin went along with that. And that was very timely because our Community Development Department, Director Julie Willey, had been working on this Everett, our emergency mobile opioid treatment in Everett program. And that was one of the priorities, the idea of street medicine programs. Former Governor Gregoire had a personal experience in an emergency room that really brought home the challenges that our emergency rooms face and the kind of the treatment that gets provided there and the population that is seeking help there and just seeking other tools to meet those needs. So she pushed that as among a few initiatives, and thanks, I think, honestly, thanks very much to both, in particular, Senator Robinson as the chair of the Budget Committee in the Senate, but also our representatives, Representative Fossey in her other role, and Representative Cortez for advocating for Everett to be on that list. So this is a new type of program. The money will come through Department of Commerce, but they don't issue grants for this type of service. They haven't done it before, and there's a concern that it would take, the Department of Commerce said, the need makes sense to us. It will take us a long time to roll out a grant program that's brand new that we haven't dealt with before. So that direct allocation that the mayor talks about all the time at the federal level, also important at the state level, was part of this. And so there's a handful of other communities, Seattle and Spokane, and I think a couple others that were on that list. And again, yeah, $500,000 out of the state operating budget, which is really exciting and will help ensure that sort of source of funding for this. And our opioid dollars that we had thought we would need to spend on this can be programmed either to continue that or for, other similar needs. So, yeah, it was a great win that was not really on our radar when session started, but yeah, it was awesome. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to hone in on it, the significance of that funding. I think there was 3 or 4 local jurisdictions named in the operating budget. We were one of those local jurisdictions. So thank you to our local legislators for getting the city of Everett that funding. A couple other bills that we were a little bit more vocal on and testified in support. Senate Bill 5804 concerning opioid overdose reversal medication in public schools. We had Officer Fletcher testify pro on that piece of legislation, which would maintain reversal medication in schools, so that was great to see. That bill did pass the legislature, and the governor signed that bill this year. House Bill 1956, addressing fentanyl and other substance use prevention education. City of Everett Youth Advisory Board testified pro on that bill, as did Officer Fletcher as well. I know Chief DeRoos also signed in on various proposals on opioids, and that bill also passed the legislature this year, so great to see those advance this year. I want to give a big thanks to our local legislators, Senator Robinson, Representative Fossey in her other role, Representative Cortez, Senator Elias was huge on the transportation funding, as was Representative Fossey, Councilmember Fossey, and Cortez and Senator Robinson. So wouldn't be possible without great local representatives and senators representing the city, and really happy that we could bring home some strong wins in a supplemental budget year. So happy to answer any questions unless Jennifer has anything else to add. Okay.
Thank you very much for the report. Do we have any questions? Excuse me, Councilmember Bader.
Oh, Councilmember.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. So two questions. First one, I thought there was some effort to lower the extremely high bar for voluntary commitment that I think creates some struggles regarding public safety and health of some individuals. What happened with that? Any thoughts about the future?
Jennifer, do you want to?
Well, Councilmember River actually asked me about this earlier, but I had a lot of afternoon meetings with some of you up there on the dais, so I didn't have time to look into it. But my memory around and it is an issue with involuntary commitment standards and also the investment in it. So the standard and then also our ability to have treatment bed, or not treatment, it's really just beds available and the assessments that happen. But I don't believe there was any movement on that. The mayor worked on that issue too, but I don't think there was anything.
Yeah, and the mayors and business leaders group that I'm a part of with other mayors across Snohomish County, it is something that we are continuing to track, but I think that there's a lot of work still to be done, and we'll probably be bringing something, some recommendation forward next session regarding this. And I think there's a couple of folks that some of my fellow mayors are working directly with in other parts of the county. Representatives. And so I'll try to follow up with you, Councilmember Bader, and update the council too on any work that the mayors and business leaders is doing, because it's additional advocacy work. That we were not very active this session. We were really mainly just kind of watching and seeing if there were any public safety initiatives. Obviously, the opioid things were all very important to us, and we weighed in on some of those, but yeah.
Thank you. And then my second question would be, I think there was some effort, and I think it was Mayor Bobber might have been leading this, to get, to create a police levy, much mirroring like the EMS levy. Sorry, I don't have all my facts or information straight, but just wondering, I know that didn't pass, but does that have legs that it might carry over into the next session?
Yeah, so that was the, yeah, it was, Kent was very active in that, and it was the making the public safety sales tax a councilmanic option.
Local option, correct.
Yeah, so a council in the state could choose to enact that without going to the voters. Councils can do that, but you have to go to the voters for approval now. So that didn't move forward either. I mean, I think it'll be on the table again in a future session with, I'm sure, AWC, and Kent was super motivated, and the county, Snohomish County, was also advocated for that, and so did we, so.
That, Councilmember, that bill got a little bit lost in the shuffle of the increase of the property tax cap, so that kind of was the bill that took the steam on local revenue. Unfortunately, both did not make it past the legislature this last year.
Thank you. That's, thank you, Council President. That's all the questions I have on this.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you for the briefing.
Also, just a quick thanks to all you council members. I know you all were very active in either signing on to stakeholder letters or reaching out, seeing how you could be helpful. So thank you for your participation, and definitely a team effort on all these legislative priorities. So thank you for it.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5, our last but not least briefing on revenue options. We have Finance Director Susie Haugen here to brief us. Hello, Susie.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody. So tonight, we'll take a quick look at how city services are funded, and we'll also dig into the difference between general government and non-general government services. Following that, we will go over the general government services that the levy lid lift could support, and finish up with some time for council discussion. So the city's financial structure at its most basic level is divided between the general government and the non-general government. The general government, or the core difference between the two, is how they were funded. The general government is funded primarily by taxes and fees, which are subject to legislative restrictions and highly sensitive to economic cycles. The ebb and flow of annual resources in the general government budgeting is particularly challenging because the demand for public services typically increases during economic downturns, just as the resources available to fund those services are on the decline. The non-general government is funded chiefly by rates, as in water and sewer utility rates, fees, and grants. The City Council sets water and sewer rates at the level needed to deliver services and fund capital investments to maintain the systems, prepare for growth, and comply with regulatory environmental requirements. The council also sets solid waste fees and transit fees. In addition, Everett Transit receives funding in the form of a voted sales tax and federal grants. The distinction between the general government and non-general government services is critical when we're talking about the city's structural deficit and the proposed levy lid lift. The purpose of the lid lift is to support the city's general government, which represents the basic core services that are essential to creating and maintaining a livable city, including public safety, the city's top priority. As noted on the previous slide, the primary funding sources are taxes and fees, with taxes representing about 77% of total resources, and property taxes account for more than 33% of all taxes. So with such a large portion of the general government's resources held to no more than 1% growth, revenues have not kept pace with the cost of providing these essential services, which has created the deficit that we are trying to solve here. The city's non-general government services represent business-type activities and are accounted for separately. They are self-funded through rates, fees, and grants, and do not rely upon general taxes for operations or capital needs. This is important to keep in mind as council reviews and approves major capital projects, such as the replacement of the utilities Reservoir 3, which was on the agenda just last week. I understand it can be fairly confusing that a $62 million capital project is being approved, yet at the same time, we are asking taxpayers to pay more. The reason why we are able to move forward with such a large capital investment is because it is not part of the general government. Although the utility is most certainly part of the city, it is funded, accounted for, and operated as a separate business entity. Council sets the water and sewer and storm rates at levels necessary to operate and fund the maintenance and capital needs required to provide clean drinking water to much of Snohomish County and wastewater treatment to Everett residents as well as our customers outside of Everett. It receives no funding support from the general government. And perhaps even more importantly, state law prohibits the utility of providing unearned funding support to the general government. So now I'd like to drill down into the services that the lid lift could support. First and foremost, public safety. Public safety has been the city's top priority for as long as I can remember, because there's really nothing more important than creating an environment where our residents and business owners can feel safe in their homes, in our parks, on our streets, and at work. In the 2024 budget, we added new police officers to respond to evolving community needs. To do that, we leaned heavily on grants and other reimbursements, which will run out in 2 to 3 years. Additional funding is needed to support these positions past that point. The community development and social worker team serves the city's most vulnerable population. They are trained professionals who work to connect people with behavioral health services and housing. In 2023, we added 2 mental health professionals to work alongside EMS staff, and then 2 more who are stationed at our library. These new positions, together with the existing social worker staff, are making a difference where it is needed most. And like the recent additions to our police department, here too, the city is dependent upon limited term grants to fund the services. A more stable source of funding is needed to continue this important work over the long term. Community programs like our parks, library, arts, and popular community events enrich the lives of Everett residents and help recruit, retrain, and attract businesses. They are all vital to the quality of life in Everett. And fundamentally, they make life more fun. Our parks provide green space and a broad range of recreational opportunities for everyone to enjoy. Our libraries provide open access to lifelong learning and connect people to services that inform, educate, and entertain. The arts create a sense of pride and place. Our neighborhoods provide a network of civic engagement that fosters a sense of community among our residents. And events like Sorticulture, the 4th of July Festival, Wintertide, and many more bring a broad array of people together to share and enjoy what makes Everett special. Sadly, these are also the services and programs that have experienced the deepest cuts as the city has been forced to make difficult decisions over the years to close the annual budget gaps. Without this lid list, it is likely that we will see more reductions in these valuable programs going forward. And finally, I'd like to make a few points about some public-facing services that may not always be top of mind, but are nevertheless critical to a highly functioning city. Adequately staffed planning and permitting services ensure that construction is safe and meets code. It also promotes economic development by ensuring that our permitting process is not seen as an obstacle to developers who are considering investing in Everett. Our code compliance officers work to improve blighted or nuisance properties that can be a danger to the public health and safety in our neighborhoods. Our civil engineers design our streets and traffic control systems to keep people moving safely and efficiently throughout the city. And I think we can all take a certain amount of pride in the quality of Everett's streets, which has been a long-standing priority. You may not notice how good Everett's roads are until you go to a city where they are not. Having well-maintained streets not only reduces wear and tear on our vehicles, but it also saves the city an enormous amount of money over the long term. As without good maintenance program, we would be completely replacing streets rather than just overlaying them at a cost of 10 to 20 times more than had we continued to prioritize the annual overlay program. So without financial relief, the city will not be able to continue to support these services and programs at the same level. And this is a short briefing tonight. That concludes what I have prepared, and I would like to turn it over to Council President for further discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And if you could just keep that slide up there too, I appreciate you having our next steps on the continuing plan. Also, just like to add, as we go through this process, ideally, if council has any questions or points of view that might take staff time, that you guys could submit those to administration in writing sooner than later. That would be appreciated, so they can get a good response. And we can make it part of this discussion too also. So at this point, do we have any questions? Councilmember Zerlingo.
One comment, make sure I'm clear on this, because this is a question that's come up a time or two when I discussed the cities providing water, clean water to 2/3 of the county or so, and that separate budget. That you said is independently supported, and the real point is the rest of the county that's getting that water is paying their share of that, the infrastructure costs and maintenance costs and that sort of thing.
Yes, that's correct.
Councilmember Bader, I can't see you. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Council President. So the one, I guess, maybe not so much a question as much as or question comment about, obviously, the purpose of the levy lift, I think, as we've been talking about, is to fill the gap so that we could continue to support these services. I think the question I would pose would be, when do we begin a process with our public that would talk about, if this doesn't pass, where would they like us to reduce services? Because obviously that's what we're facing here if we aren't successful with levy lift. So thinking that we need to begin to think about that, whether that's a process that happens before an August election, or if we hold that in abeyance if we're not to pass.
So this is Cassie, Councilmember Bader. But I think part of the answer is that process is, and it should be happening now and ongoing. Every time I'm at a neighborhood meeting, every time I'm engaged with our community, every time you are all engaged with the community, I think we're hearing direct feedback as to what our residents are passionate about, what they see as necessary, essential services. I'll use my meeting with the Council of Neighborhoods, and I heard loud and clear how important supporting neighborhoods is. I've heard loud and clear how important our arts and cultural events are. considering some of the reductions we've had to make in the past, or our parks. We hear daily how important safety is. And so I think in about, during the Q&A, probably the public hearing, as well as definitely by April 24th, we'll be talking about more specifically what's vulnerable if this doesn't pass. And I think we're far from ready to say what we would cut if it doesn't pass, because I hope that we put together something that our residents will weigh in and support, and that we all can agree is necessary to sustain these services. But I can tell you, we've had some meetings internally, and there's honestly nothing I'm comfortable cutting. We have made those cuts over the last decades, and certainly very aggressively over the last 6 years. There's not a single area on that slide deck that I was like, I think we could trim back a little bit there. There just isn't. And so you're right, having our residents weigh in, what that process looks like, I think we'll discuss together with the team. I'm open to council sharing ideas of how they would want to collect resident feedback. But I think that will ultimately be on us to make those very tough decisions should we have to cut multiple millions of dollars out of our budget this next year and the years following. So what you saw on the slide deck are the departments that are funded by the general fund. And in order to balance that level of gap, you could imagine horrific, significant cuts in what we would consider at this point necessary services. And I don't think there's going to be a resident that's going to think that these are good ideas of the cuts that we'd be talking about.
Again, I'd like to add to that too. Next meeting on April 10th, we're going to talk about a recap of the city's effort in our deficit reduction. And there's not too many departments that haven't had some sort of reduction. Certainly our capital improvement funds have not really received the funding that fits the projected need long-term. And those are long-term funds that save money over a longer period of time. There isn't really much we haven't done. And one message that I'd like to say is, the tax reduction efforts by the legislature and the voters have worked. In essence, they are doing what they've designed. And that is, we have cut and trimmed and reduced our spending to the point where, okay, now we have to go to the voters. I don't think that needs to be taken as a negative. I think, well, the tax initiative passed, and it's doing what it was intended to, whether you agree with it or not. So at this point, I think being accountable to our voters and saying, okay, we've done everything we can, and now it's time to let our voters decide what they want to do. So anyway, I just want to add that. I think I saw Council Member Tui had a question or comment.
Yeah, so I have a comment and question for Susie. So next week is the past deficit reduction efforts. And I remember when I first came on council, was it the SDAT? Was that what it called? And it was a study and compared the city of Everett with lots of surrounding cities on rates and fees across the board on many, many areas. And we were very much the lowest, if I recall, on almost every fee and rate. And we immediately, I think, bumped those up so that we were at least in the middle of the rest of the cities, surrounding cities. And where do we sit today? Or is that part of next week's?
Well, I can tell you, in general, one of the things that we did when we were actually looking at our fees, which had really not changed for a decade or more, when we were updating those, we also tied their future rate increases to CPI. So what has happened over time then is that our fees are increasing annually by small amounts, just to keep them current. So it certainly always makes sense for us to take a look, another look, and see where we're at relative to our peers. But at least I do not believe, and I am confident that we are not back to where we were when we did that. So So that's the good news, but that is definitely another stone that will be unturning.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ryan.
Great. Thank you, Susie. I appreciate the information delineation between the two funds and where the money comes from. I think I often hear from community members about, why don't we just raise the golf fees or some of these other revenue-generating sources that we're statutorily prohibited from using to fund the general fund. So I think it's a great reminder of the limited number of departments that would be impacted, but then also the critical services that the limited number of departments provide. So thank you for sharing that. I think that information included in our messaging would be really helpful too, of a reminder of like what's at stake, what's on the chopping block, what's not included in a levy lid lift. So thank you for that. And I wanted to, I think it's a quote from Ryan Sass about roads projects, that it's either an infrastructure projects, that it's either you can pay it now or you can pay more later. So
It's very
I think
true.
that's a good reminder as well. The discussion question was what resonates with you about the services that make Everett so livable, and just looking through the pictures just reminds me of how great Everett is and what a great place it is to live here. And I think just a good reminder that if we want to just maintain our quality of life now, just how critical it is for this to pass. So I guess I don't really have a question so much as just feedback that I think more baby kittens, I guess, in pictures would be helpful. Great, thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to add a couple of points. What I'm hearing from my neighbors and residents is that they like the city of Everett providing all the unique services, like having the city of Everett, their own library system, their own transit, their own fire department. I think that really is what makes Everett unique, specifically here in the local region. And I'm hearing that over and over. I really think that it adds to our identity. When you talk about the cost of things, everybody is obviously concerned, but when you start talking about, removing some of our coveted services, that you get a different response. So I think when you talk about, what's resonating is really the special, it's really a neat thing that the city provides all those. I think it's a good thing. Obviously, it has its cost. One thing that I think would be important, just an idea, just for discussion, is I know there's a lot of different ways to that a resident in a community pays taxes, and we're specifically talking about a property rate. And I'm sure you've probably looked at how we compare to rates in other places to live. I mean, in the end, that's really what we're voting on, a rate, and I'm assuming that the city of Everett's property tax rate is certainly not the highest, but certainly, I'm guessing middle or lower.
Well, it's very difficult to compare the city to our peers in Snohomish County because, as you were just pointing out, we are the only full-service city. So while the cities around us do have a regular property tax, they also don't have a library, and they also don't have fire service. And some of them, animal shelter. Yes, we could actually go on for quite a while about that. So it is very difficult to create an apples-to-apples comparison between us and our peer cities. We would have to add in all these other services that their taxpayers pay for, so and create an amalgamated rate, for the other cities. We can take a look at that, though, and get back to you for other Snohomish County cities. And I'd also, it is really important as the Everett residents are contacting you all and giving you comments and asking you questions about this. Note that on April 17th, we are having a Q&A session and a public hearing. And so it would be really helpful and make that perhaps a better and more productive session if you would share all those comments with Jennifer and she can let me help prepare some responses so that we're ready with those ahead of time. So that would be really wonderful if you keep us in mind as people are communicating with you.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Ryan.
Questions to Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Can you share more about the format for that meeting?
Well, so just a normal, we'll probably, so I don't know, we haven't totally talked about it, but I would say it would be like a normal public hearing. So we'll do a staff briefing, folding in the feedback that the mayor's heard and then anything that you guys share with me, with the idea of kind of a Q&A, myths and facts, and as part of that briefing on the 17th, public hearing for folks that attend or attend via Zoom.
And we'll try to advertise that public hearing so that we're getting folks, obviously you're all attending neighborhood meetings and some people are really engaged on this topic. And so the goal would be to get some of those folks that have strong opinions on what we should and shouldn't do to come to council, ask questions, make comments, and then that will give us something to provide feedback to.
So is it more of like a town hall type of, so are the questions coming from us or are constituents allowed to ask questions that we then answer?
That's a great point. No, not like a town hall, like a normal public hearing. So staff briefing that hopefully will address some questions that we've heard, not everything, and then opportunities for folks to take their minutes at the podium to share their thoughts. So not to get, maybe we'll change the bullet next week on there to not say Q&A public hearing. It's just a public hearing with the briefing. The briefing is modeled after kind of answering questions that we've heard from council members and the public.
Yeah, the Q&A part is for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great if there was a way for constituents, either through us or through a Dropbox of some sort, to submit questions ahead of time so that they can get answers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to collect those. We're probably close to having our webpage up. Anyways, yeah.
I'll work with the communications team that we put a few things out on social media. That's kind of our best place to say, hey, provide questions so we'll see if we can get some comments that way. But I honestly, in your engagements in the community, we're kind of the spokespeople. So if we are out in the community, say, please give me your questions and bring them back. And then as a council, if you submit those to Jennifer, you can submit 15 questions, Councilmember Ryan, and we know they're not all from you because they're from people you've heard. And then if we can then address them publicly as if all 15 of those people that asked you a question at the grocery store were actually here in this room. That's the goal, is that we're collecting kind of the assumptions and things that we're hearing that may or may not be accurate.
Sure. But between now and the 17th, though, I have 4 neighborhood association meetings out of my 6, so I'm missing a couple that I could be talking to. So I guess timing-wise, soliciting from our full slate of monthly meetings isn't possible in 2 weeks.
It's a compressed timeline to get us to that August primary date. That's true.
And that's totally fine. I'm just saying if we want to have full participation, there needs to be extra active, proactive outreach in the next couple of weeks to folks that we wouldn't be seeing in the next 2 weeks.
We'll make sure to, we'll be focusing on that.
Thanks.
If you have ideas, please share.
So I have a question. Do we have several members of the public that have signed up for the notification process, like what's going on in the neighborhood or what's going on in the city?
You mean sort of like the Civic Plus platform on the website that we use where you can get those emails? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Is the plan to maybe send a notification out of this public hearing? Just to,
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, okay, thank you, yeah.
I'll make it part of the plan, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Also, I would lean on our council neighborhoods to also let them know.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
It's a little short hallway between me and their main person, so I'll make sure that she gets that out. So at least we can reach the Council of Neighborhood leadership. And the mayor actually attended their Council of Neighborhoods meeting a couple weeks ago, and they did have a good chance to share. We'll actually pull some of the questions that they asked at that meeting, but at least those neighborhood leaders that were there had a robust opportunity. I think the mayor was on their calendar for like 10 minutes, and it was a large portion of the meeting, but it was great. They were really engaged, and we heard a lot of feedback from the leaders, so, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Susie. And Jennifer, you made part of the process, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we are going to, we're going to take an executive session. It's expected to last 15 minutes. Okay, council, executive session is ended. We are adjourned. No further business.